Okay, our study was on increasing physical activity through self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback. The purpose of our study. Struggles with weight and obesity continue to be a problem throughout our society. It is estimated that approximately 1/3 of American adults suffer from obesity, while 2/3 are estimated to be overweight. This is often caused by poor eating habits or lack of physical activity. Dealing with the excess weight can often lead to health problems, both physically and mentally, which is why it is important to develop methods that can help combat this problem. It can be problematic to focus on weight directly because weight is affected by various behaviors and characteristics of life. It also cannot sufficiently measure one's health alone. As a result, it is more appropriate to focus on a healthy behavior, such as increasing physical activity rather than weight. The overall purpose of our study is to assess whether the use of a package intervention inclusive of self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback can increase the number of daily steps taken, ultimately increasing overall daily physical activity. The methods of our study. The participants include 6 graduate-level students from Ball State University that participated in the project. This includes 5 females and 1 male, and the ages ranged from 24 to 32 years old. The setting. As participants live in several states, the setting varied for each person. Each participant collected personal data throughout their typical daily life from the hours of 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. at night. The materials that were used. A Fitbit or a Pacer pedometer phone application for iPhone and Samsung Galaxy were used to track each daily step. Google Sheets were used to log data each night, and Google Hangouts were used for group meetings and also to provide feedback.
Continuing on with methods, the behavior definition, we defined a step as operationally defined as advancing or traveling by moving feet alternately so that there's always one foot on the ground in bipedal locomotion. This movement for us would result in a count being recorded and displayed on our pedometer of choice. For data collection, we utilized Fitbits and the Pacer pedometer phone application for the iPhone and the Samsung Galaxy. Each participant had their own step tracking tool, and we each entered our data at the end of each day into a shared Google Sheets document. Our data was collected between the hours of 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. Our data was recorded daily and totaled weekly, and a new weekly goal was set by finding the average steps taken during the previous week. This was found by dividing the total steps for the week by the total amount of days in the week, which is obviously 7. The design that we used is a single subject research design. In addition, an ABA design was used for each participant. During our baseline phase, each participant tracked their daily steps between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. using their Fitbit or their phone application. At the end of each day during the baseline phase, we each logged our daily amount on our Google spreadsheet, and we shared it between ourselves. This was the best means of data collection due to the location of each of us, since we're all located in different states. After 8 p.m., we each logged our data for the day into our Excel spreadsheet. Steps throughout the day were not viewed by participants until this time. No feedback was provided by fellow group members during the baseline phase. At the end of the baseline week, totals were calculated and an average daily step count was determined. This average was used as the initial goal for week 1 of the intervention phase.
For the intervention phase, daily steps for each participant for the prior week were totaled and averaged. The goal for the following week was to increase the daily average of steps from the previous week. The goal for the initial intervention week was created using the baseline average and was to achieve an average daily step amount greater than or equal to the baseline average. This was continued by using each following week's average step amounts. After 8 p.m. each evening during the intervention phase, participants input their daily step count into the shared Google spreadsheet. This was the time for participants to provide feedback to each other based off their performance. Goal attainment praise was also given at this time. These were phrases such as, great job, increasing your steps, keep up the hard work a little harder this week, keep your goal in mind, etc. This continued each week. If a participant did not meet their goal for a given week, their goal remained the same from the previous week and did not increase. The purpose of the intervention phase was to increase the goal amounts each week. After the intervention phase, we had a return to baseline phase. So after 4 weeks of an intervention phase, participants returned to the baseline phase, at which point all feedback provided from fellow participants was discontinued. Participants continued to track their steps between the hours of 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. and logged their steps in the shared Google spreadsheet after 8 p.m. each evening. This phase served to demonstrate whether the intervention was responsible for any changes that may have occurred in each participant's daily step count.
In order to keep track of our daily steps, each member used a method for data collection. So like we said earlier, it was either a Fitbit or the Pacer pedometer app. Because of constraints related to location, our group wasn't able to designate a specific experimenter to collect all of the data, to calculate the averages and goals, and then to provide feedback. So to compensate for this, we dispersed these roles among each of the participants. Each individual participant was responsible for logging their own total step counts at the end of each day. And so again, that was sometime after 8 p.m. and before they went to bed each night. Each individual also calculated their own averages and set their own goals based on their previous week's data. The remaining group members then were responsible for providing feedback and encouragement to each other based on their daily goals. Each group member had access to a Google spreadsheet so that they could see each other's totals, and then we all had a shared Google Hangouts message where we could provide feedback to each other. And when looking at treatment fidelity, we were keeping in mind that this is the degree to which the intervention is implemented and defined by our plan protocol. So it's important to make sure each individual is keeping up with their data within the study. We measured fidelity by the days each participant entered their daily step totals, because we knew that if a participant didn't put their daily step totals in, they would not be able to receive feedback related to their goal. So we calculated integrity by dividing the number of days each participant put their data into the spreadsheet by the total number of days in the intervention period. So in order to implement the intervention correctly, each member had to follow this procedure as it was planned. Fortunately, each of the 6 members input their daily data 42 days out of the 42-day intervention period, so we measured our integrity at a rate of 100%. Next, we have our participant graph and our survey results. So these figures show our daily and weekly averages, as well as our social validity opinions on how we thought the intervention helped us. In order to increase our goals, see if I can do the screen share. Okay. So first we have my averages for the baseline period, the intervention period, and then when we return to the baseline. So our baseline period were those first 7 days where my average was 8,479 steps, and then my range was 3,834 steps during that first week. Weeks 2 through 5 were then our intervention period. So my daily average during this time increased to 9,119 steps, and my range was 12,229 steps. And then the last week, the 6th week, was our return to baseline period, where my baseline average fell to 7,848 steps, and my range was 3,189 steps.
Lindsay, are you going to do your social validity survey?
Sorry, thank you. Yes, I am. For the social validity survey, we had 4 questions that we answered based on our feelings of the effectiveness of the overall survey. So let me screen share again. Sorry about that. So for the first question, we were to rate the effectiveness of having the step goal each week and how we felt regarding that. I rated that as a 3, that I agreed that the step goal did help me increase my overall steps. The second question was our feelings towards the self-monitoring and how that increased our steps. Again, I rated that as a 3, that I agreed. As far as the feedback from peers, I also agreed that that helped me increase my overall steps. And then finally, my overall feelings and opinions for this intervention was that I did agree that it helped me increase my daily physical activity.
Okay, I will go over my graph results now. Let me screen share. Okay. Can everyone see that okay? Okay. Okay, so for my baseline, my baseline average was 7,019 steps, and then my range was 3,483. My intervention range increased, the average increased to 10,557 steps, and then the range was 9,615. And then when we went back to baseline, my average was 11,733 steps, and then the range was 6,332 steps. And I really found it interesting when we monitored our own steps. I used a Fitbit. Personally, that's what I used. And it was really interesting to see and track that. Sorry. It was really interesting to see how that changed and track that and what was going on in my life, which we will talk about that when we get to the limitations. But that was really fascinating to see that and see how it increased overall for my results. Looking at my social validity survey, I really felt that having that step goal each week increased my overall steps. I liked seeing my numbers go up intrinsically. I was motivated by that, and then seeing it also was motivating. The self-monitoring, I felt, like I just said, I strongly agreed with that. I felt as though that really helped me with wanting to get more steps and doing more physical activity. Feedback from peers, just hearing that socially also was encouraging. So I gave that a 3, ranked that a 3, and agreed with that. And then overall, I really felt like self-monitoring, the goal setting, and that feedback helped with the daily physical activity.
Okay, so I'm going to share my graph next. Let's see here, screen share. Okay, do you guys see my screen? You don't see it? Hang on. How about now? Still no? Oh, God. Okay. Oh, wait. Okay. How about now? Good? Okay, cool. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's my graph. In my baseline week, I had an average of 7,670 steps with a range of 5,440. During the intervention phase, I had a slight increase in terms of average steps. I went up to 7,828, and the range was 11,917. And then for the second baseline phase, my average actually increased yet again, and this time more significantly, to 8,417 with a range of 7,105. And so for my survey, for the first one, I felt that having a step goal each week increased my overall steps. I agree with that. I also agree that self-monitoring helped increase my steps each week. As for the feedback, I'm actually kind of neutral towards that, because I felt that in the return to baseline phase, the feedback had stopped, yet I actually made the most progress during that phase. And I think that was because, I still had my own goals set for myself. And so I think that I can conclude that that the having the goal and self-monitoring were more effective in increasing my overall steps. And so finally, do I feel that self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback helped increase my overall daily physical activity? I, of course, said that I agree with that.
Okay, so I'm going to share my graph now. During my baseline average, I got 8,876 steps. The range for my baseline was 420, so I didn't have quite a large range during my baseline phase. During my intervention, my average was 9,002. And during my intervention range, during my intervention phase, my range was 1,552. Back to baseline, my average was 8,851, and my range during my second baseline was 1,275. So I did increase during my intervention average, and then during my back to baseline, I went very close back to my initial baseline average. As far as my social validity survey, I did feel like having a step goal each week helped to increase my overall steps. Got an alert from my pacer reminding me to check in on my steps today. I do believe that self-monitoring was successful for most of my group mates, but for myself, I didn't really agree or disagree with that. I didn't feel very accountable to myself, but I did agree with feeling that having received feedback from my peers during the intervention phase increased my motivation. I felt like self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback did help me to increase my daily physical activity.
Stacy, you just muted yourself.
I finished both of my slides.
I'll go next here. Let me just share my screen. Can everybody see that okay? Okay. Okay, so this was my graph for the experiment. For my initial baseline week, I averaged 6,496 steps with a baseline range of 2,934. For the intervention phase for weeks 2 through 5, I averaged 6,950 steps, and my range for that period of time was 4,217. And then returning back to baseline, receiving no intervention, I averaged 7,520 steps, and my range was 2,974. For my social validity survey, I across the board pretty much agreed. I agreed that having a step goal each week definitely helped to increase my overall steps. It was kind of nice for me to know a number in my head and to kind of strive for wanting to get over that number. I also believe that self-monitoring was successful. I feel the feedback I received from peers certainly helped to motivate me during this experiment. And I feel overall that the whole package intervention definitely helped to increase my overall daily physical activity.
I'm not sure if Kelly is still here because her video went away, and I know that she was having severe weather where she was at. So I can share Kelly's information.
Her mic is muted too. I still see her down there though.
Well, I see her picture, but I don't see her video.
Yeah.
She just sent a message in Hangouts that said she just lost the internet, lost power.
Okay, so I can share Kelly's results. Let me go back to the screen share. So for Kelly's baseline week, she had an average of 5,346 steps per day, and her range during that period was 6,241 steps. During the intervention period, her intervention average increased daily to 6,619 steps per day, and her range was 3,377 steps per day. And then that final week, the baseline, her average fell to 5,268 steps per day, and her range was 1,720 steps.
Hey guys, so sorry, my power and my internet are out, but I'm on my phone.
Oh, that's okay. I just shared your graph results, so if you want to do your survey.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, can everyone see that okay? My social validity survey, I feel that I have a step goal each week, help to increase my overall steps. I said that I agreed with that. And then with the self-monitoring being successful in increasing, I strongly agreed with that. For me, I'm a goal setter, and self-monitoring through that really helped me and held me accountable. I feel that feedback I received from my peers during the intervention phase helped to increase my overall motivation during this experiment. I put that I agree with that. And then lastly, for the last question, overall, do you feel that self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback help to increase your daily physical activity? I said that I agree with that as well.
Okay, and on to the results. Overall, we as the participants of this study showed an increase in our daily step totals following the introduction of the intervention phase, which did incorporate the self-monitoring, goal setting, and the feedback. The daily step average decreased for Lindsay, Stacy, and Kelly when they returned to the baseline phase once the intervention was removed. For Kelsey, Zach, and myself, our daily step averages still continue to increase, actually, even when we did return to that second baseline phase and the intervention was removed. As far as the results go for our daily step totals, Lindsay increased her total steps during the intervention phase, actually reaching the highest number of daily steps taken among any of the participants at 18,251 steps. During the return to baseline, her total steps for that week decreased in comparison to her intervention phase. Overall, Lindsay's total step averages remained relatively stable across all three phases of this experiment. Kelsey averaged more steps each week during the intervention phase compared to any of the other participants. Throughout each week of the experiment, including initial baseline, intervention, and the reintroduction of baseline, Kelsey consistently met and exceeded her weekly goals. Unlike many of the other participants, she continued to increase her daily total step average in the return to baseline phase. Zach had relatively close total step averages across all three stages of the experiment. In comparison to other participants, he had the lowest daily steps totaled some days. He had the most varied daily step totals, which ranged between 2,443 and 14,360. And this is evident in the continued up and down pattern, which was seen in his graph. Despite this variation, Zach did continue to increase his total average steps across each phase of the experiment. For myself, I increased my total steps during the intervention phase and also continued this trend into the return to baseline phase. Overall, my data remained relatively stable across my daily totals and phase totals throughout each phase. Out of all the participants, Stacy had the most stable data across all phases of the experiment. Her total phase averages were very close across all 3 phases. Although minimally noted, her total weekly steps did decrease in the return to baseline phase in comparison to her intervention phase. And Kelly increased her total steps during the intervention phase. However, her steps did decrease once the intervention was discontinued and she returned to her baseline.
Okay, looking at the results of the social validity, I know we each went over our individual results, but kind of looking at it as a whole, as we know, we completed that social validity survey. It assessed our thoughts on the effectiveness of the study. The effectiveness was rated on a 4-point scale regarding step goals, the self-monitoring, and the feedback. 0 was strongly disagreeing with its effectiveness, 1 disagreeing, 2 was neither agreeing or disagreeing, 3 was agreeing, and 4 was strongly agreeing with its effectiveness. So looking at that, Lindsay, myself, Kelly, and Tabitha scored a 3 or 4 for all the statements on the social validity survey, indicating that there was an agreement or strong agreement with each statement made. Therefore, those individuals felt that the intervention phase comprised of goal setting, feedback, and that self-monitoring were useful in increasing their daily step totals and overall physical activity. Zach had scored a 3 for 3 out of the 4 statements, stating that he also agreed with them. He did, however, score 1 statement a 2, stating he neither agreed nor disagreed regarding the feedback aspect of the experiment. Stacy scored a 3 for 3 out of the 4 statements, signifying she agreed with those statements as well. She then scored a 2 in regards to self-monitoring that helped her increase her daily steps, stating neither agree or disagree. Thinking about the limitations, I kind of touched on this earlier when I was talking about my graph. The amount of steps that were taken could have been determined by each individual's schedule. So a personal example, I am a teacher at an elementary school, and for one of the weeks we were testing for I-STEP, standardized tests. So I was up and on my feet the entire time. We're not allowed to sit down, so I had more steps at that point. Also, we have portable classrooms that are outside, so I constantly am going out, coming in, going out, coming in, as a special education teacher. So just depending on what your schedule is, I noticed for myself, the weekends, I had less steps, obviously because I am walking less. So therefore, anyone's day or their activity throughout the day could impact their overall step count. Using the weekly average means that some days could have obtained particularly low totals while others were much higher. And then some other limitations would be due to our location constraints between all of us, the participants, the role of an experimenter was eliminated from our study. So as a result, we relied on each participant's honesty in regards to data collecting and recording. So that could also be something that's a limitation. Additionally, the devices that we utilize to track the steps could be more or less sensitive. Some individuals used an app on their phone, others used a Fitbit or a pedometer. So depending on what device you use, something could count a step easier than an app or the Fitbit, either way. So as a result of time constraints for the study, we were unable to complete a multiple baseline design as completed in the original study. Obviously, we had just the baseline, the intervention, the baseline. Also, one participant was required to change their step tracking tool halfway through the second baseline week due to the original device breaking, which life happens, things like this happen. So that could have also hindered reliability and the consistency of the steps taken. Also, there is a step tracking converting. So converting chart. So depending on your activity, let's say you're walking, you're running, etc., those steps could be counted differently. More vigorous physical activity, less, so those could be tracked differently. As 3 interventions were used at once, the self-monitoring, the goal setting, and the feedback, we're really truly unable to determine which intervention was the most effective for each participant. So that's where that social validity survey came in, and then just your own personal experience came in as well.
So in conclusion, based on each participant's analysis of our individual graphs and our data, we all concluded that we felt self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback was able to increase our physical activity through calculating our daily step totals. We said this because all 6 participants were able to increase their daily average step count when the self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback was implemented. Additionally, once the intervention was removed, only 3 of the 6 participants were able to continue to increase their daily step count, which suggests that the intervention was effective in increasing the counts, but generalization was not achieved in the study. We also discussed that minor alterations could be made to improve the study in order to learn more about the effectiveness of each intervention. Like we just said, this study involved 3 different interventions being implemented at one time. So that would be the self-monitoring, the goal setting, and the feedback. Some interventions may have been more or less effective for individual participants. The only way that this study was able to determine the effectiveness of each one was through the social validity survey, which was based on our own individual opinions and feelings. Again, overall, each participant was able to find success through the interventions, but we're not sure which ones were the most effective. Similar studies found mixed results of this when they analyzed specific interventions. One study that we looked at by Van Wormer did not find that the peer feedback was actually effective in increasing the steps over their weekly feedback. However, another study by Alvaro, Buckland, and Austin in 2001 did find that daily feedback was the most effective over utilizing weekly feedback. So in order to attain more clarity on the effectiveness of each intervention, we could participate in one intervention at a time and monitor the effectiveness of each one in order to figure out which one is actually the most effective for each participant. And we also said that additional studies could be completed in order to aid participants to achieve generalization in increasing their step totals. Again, we said that only 50% of the participants were able to continue to increase their step counts once those interventions were removed. So in conclusion, the results show that self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback is effective in increasing daily activity levels. We did say, however, it's not clear which interventions were the most effective in increasing these amounts, and also that generalization was not achieved for everyone in this study of the skill.
Is that it?
That is it.
Okay, you guys probably can't see me for some reason. My camera's not working, but as long as you can hear me okay, right? Okay, so you guys did great. I really enjoyed hearing about your presentation. It was very polished and well put together. I think you guys did a study similar to, I think some other groups probably did the same study or other fitness types of like related studies. So it will be interesting when you get to the point of discussion, kind of comparing the experiences that you had. But I think so far you guys are the only ones who included a social validity questionnaire. So that's always good, a way to boost your design and kind of talk qualitatively about your experience. And I also just like another thing that I was really happy to see was that you all had your graphs in this in a consistent format, which surprisingly you're the only ones that have done it so far. So that's something that I'm just kind of picky about. And so it looked very well, put together, similar to like if you were to go to a research presentation or read a journal article, you would expect their graphs to all be in the same format. So I really like that. You guys did a great job talking through your results. I have just a couple of questions just to hear a little bit more about kind of what each of your experiences was like. And one of the, like your biggest conclusions that I think you guys talked about was how it's hard to tell which of the interventions, self-monitoring, goal setting, or feedback was contributing to the change in your behavior. So I was just wondering how much you thought, just to make sure I'm clear, when you were taking baseline data, you were entering the data daily into the spreadsheet, right?
Yes, we were doing that.
Okay, so there was just no feedback from your group members. But
Correct. There was no feedback, or we didn't go in with a goal set or anything like that. It was just strictly implementing our daily steps each day.
Okay, so do you feel like that's like a true baseline, or do you feel like that was like a phase of intervention as it in itself, since you were self-monitoring, even though you didn't have a goal in mind?
Even though we were still at the end of each day, we were putting down our step counts. Something that we made sure not to do throughout that baseline period was throughout the day, we couldn't check the amount of steps that we were taking. So that was something that was kind of left that we could do during the intervention phase, but throughout the baseline, we didn't monitor our steps until after that 8 p.m. time.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but you know, that's just kind of the nature of the data that you were collecting, was that you were the people that were entering the data every day and probably seeing how many steps that you got at the end of the day. So I just kind of wonder if you consider like, okay, my intervention phase versus my baseline phase, in some ways there was an intervention, because I don't know if prior to that, some of you might have been using Fitbit, some of you have not. So with similar to like with these fitness studies, a lot of group members have talked about, you know, just the data collection part of taking your data and your behavior is enough of an intervention. And so I just kind of wanted to get your input and feedback on that. And some of you, I did see like there was an increasing trend during your baseline, and then maybe you started intervention and then there was another change in your behavior because you added a new component to the intervention. So yeah, I was just wondering kind of what you guys thought about that, about whether or not just like monitoring your behavior was created a change in your behavior.
Personally, for myself, that did affect me. That was what affected me the most during the intervention phase, is that I was able to self-monitor myself. I think had we have been able to do the role of the experimenter, we would have had like a true 100% baseline. And what you're saying in regards to that, I think that it's the most baseline that we had due to our limitations. But I do think that that's definitely a component that we could address if we were to ever repeat or replicate the study again.
Yeah, I'm definitely not like pointing it out as a limitation. You definitely have two clear phases of your intervention, but I'm just pointing it out kind of as your role as the researcher and the person who's taking the data, and that's really how most of those like fitness apps and programs work. They're not necessarily tied to an experimental design, but you're looking and wanting, you have that motivation to improve upon what happened the previous day. Also, I was wondering too, if you weren't, even though you weren't providing feedback to your group members, if that served as like motivation for yourself too, the fact that your other group members were going to see what your daily steps were.
I thought about that throughout the study, because for me, that's another thing that motivates me too, like having a partner to hold me accountable. And so, or like knowing that we're beating each other, like days, there would be weeks that I would graph during the intervention and I would have the lowest amount of steps out of the group. And I'm like, oh, they're not going to beat me next week. Like I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to have more steps. So I do think that that's a component that also adds into that. I think there are so many intrinsic things that go on with something like this, as far as self-esteem and what motivates you, that it's hard to really evaluate and research all of the components that go into that.
Yeah, it's all of those things that we don't talk about in behavior analysis, but it's in a study like this where you're going through it, and fitness and wellness is something that I think most people consider that to be. I mean, there's definitely sometimes tangible reinforcement or social reinforcement, but there's such a component that's automatically reinforcing too when you see yourself progressing. There was a couple of you guys, I think Kelsey and Zach, that your most significant growth was in like the return to the baseline phase. And so I was just wondering what you guys thought created that change. Was that kind of what we were talking about, of that like social pressure, or the pressure that you're putting on yourself of like, oh, I want to do better. I don't want to be not making any progress. Or was there something else that contributed to that increase that was seen in the second baseline phase?
Yeah, I think for me it was, I didn't see much progress with myself from the first baseline phase to the intervention phase. And I guess I was kind of like disappointed in myself about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to, for the return to baseline, I guess I increased the amount of steps that I took for that week.
Okay. So again, kind of like that self-monitoring piece, even though you didn't have a goal, just the fact that you were monitoring how you were compared to how you did during the rest of the intervention
Right.
was sufficient or motivating you.
I felt like for myself personally, I kind of said earlier when I was going over the limitations, what was going on in my life affected my steps. Also, having that peer feedback, like I liked hearing from my peers, like, oh wow, like your steps are increasing. Where are you walking to? What are you doing? And personally, I moved that week, so I had a ton more steps when I returned to baseline because of what was going on in my life at the time. So I think that was a huge factor as well. And I kind of talked about also just at work, what was going on at work. So things like that, and definitely the social piece for me, and then intrinsically just seeing those numbers. I don't know, it was just like competing against yourself.
Yeah. Great. Okay, I don't think I have any more questions. You guys did a great job. I'm pressing you just because I feel like that you did a really great project and it was really well presented. So yeah, you did great. I don't have any additional questions. I don't think or feedback, unless you guys have anything for me. Nope.
I think I'm good, actually. Anyone else?
No, I don't think I have any questions, at least not now.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
So I will be able to probably upload your rubric tonight if I have time, and we'll just have some extra feedback in there, stuff that you can integrate into your report. But I won't be able to enter your grades until you submit on Blackboard your presentation in Module 13. So I can send you out the rubric, but it won't get entered until that assignment has been submitted to Blackboard. So great job, you guys. And
Sorry, I think I did just think of a question.
Okay, yeah.
Do you want us to upload in any way, like our PowerPoint presentation or the Excel spreadsheet that we did? Do you want any of that?
You can. It's really up to you. I think as long as you upload the video, if you want to include the presentations, that would be helpful, but it's not required either. All right, anything else?
Can we upload this video like immediately, like right now, for example?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
cool.
And we all need to upload it, or just one group member?
Just one group member. Okay. All right. Well, congrats on being done. Hopefully you're relieved with at least being done with this part of it.
Yes.
Have a good night.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.